Okay. Hi, I'm Metta Spencer, and today I get to introduce you to Art Hunter, who is in Ottawa. And you've made your way here to the World Repair Shop, where we have conversations almost every weekday with somebody who's trying to repair the world. And Art Hunter is one of those people. So he's very active. An engineer by training and background. He's very engaged with the Canadian Club of Rome. I understand he's a webmaster for the Canadian Club of Rome, which I'm about to join. And he's in Ottawa. And I imagine that what we're seeing is a basement of his home, which he has rigged up to be off the grid. So that's what we're going to talk about today. He's a guy who knows how to make mechanical things happen. And he's not only learned to live off the grid for 300 days, but I understand he's fixed up something that kills COVID bacteria in his house or viruses in his house. Is that right?
Well, that's correct, and but that's really the subject for perhaps another presentation.
Another presentation. Well, let's get down to work talking about living off the grid. Good morning, Dr. Hunter.
Well, I'll bring up my screen share so that I can describe a little bit of what my platform is. I've been doing this since 2016, so this is not all brand new material and equipment. You can see here that uh, this is one side of where we live, and I have taken our house and turned it into an energy laboratory. Um, this is just quickly where the ground source heat pump and all the plumbing, because I get all my heat from the ground, and that's this piece of ground
Oh,
beside the house.
mhm,
And here is my control room.
mhm.
This is a picture of the coil for the ground source heat pump that was going into a trench that was put in the property beside our house, and I'll showing you some of the results from the every day when the sun is shining. However, let me talk a little bit first about the mission. Now, the objective, of course, is to retrofit an Ottawa home to live a near autonomous lifestyle. It's a demonstration. It's saying, look, this is possible. It is. I've been doing it. It's real, and let's not be afraid of the technology, and let's not say it's impossible, because I have been doing it since 2016. Now, what this really means is that I'm in the business of making what I call an energy island, which means I'm independent from the electrical grid. Well, and I say largely, and I'll explain that in a minute. Independent from natural gas, just cut it off. We do not have municipal water, we're getting our water from a well. We have a septic system, so we don't have any sewage issues. Um, we don't have any storm drains because we're in the country, and those are just ditches along the side of the road. And of course, I drive an electric vehicle, so there's no automotive gasoline consumption. The energy sources which are used, of course, are the sun. Get a lot of energy from the ground. I do when the weather's really bad, and we're just about into that now. January and February are absolutely terrible normally for solar energy, so I will depend on the grid. And of course, I have 3 Tesla batteries, Powerwall batteries, which are available, and I'm always looking for other ways to get more energy. Anyway,
Right. Now, wait a minute. Let me ask you about that. You've got these Tesla batteries. I've seen pictures of those where they're like a thing hanging on the wall or something about 3 feet diameter. Is that it right there? That's a Tesla battery.
that is three of them. They're stacked up like cards.
All right.
All right.
Uh-huh. Oh.
And so that gives you a sense of size. Yes.
Now you need three for your house, or are you just playing with having a lot more than you need?
No, I selected three primarily because the startup current on our whale pump exceeds the capacity of one battery to take a major hit at startup, and I needed three of them, such that it would control and take the startup current demanded by that motor. So that's what really drove the number of batteries. In
Hmm.
fact, with hindsight, I would have put four on, knowing what I know now.
Uh-huh. And now, how much can you do with one uh, Tesla battery? How long could you run? Well, you got a lot of equipment there to run, though. So, how much would a normal household require, and how far would a Tesla battery take us?
Well, we're getting now into some of the material which I'll be talking about in the presentation material. If you
Okay.
wanted me to proceed through that, I will be using, of course, energy terms. If we're going to talk energy, I have to talk kilowatts and and kilowatt hours. So there's and that's, people are not used to those terms.
Hmm.
Um, it can be a bit trying, but I have no other way of expressing energy other than in energy terms.
Well, I don't object to that, but I have my limitations in terms of how much physics I ever absorbed, even in elementary school. So go for it.
All right. And conservation, I'm going to be talking about how we can conserve energy, both in an active and a passive sense. Normally, uh, we waste as much as 50% of the energy that is produced, and so conservation is a very large segment of how one can live off grid.
I'm sorry, how would
Uh,
we waste so much energy?
well, a lot of it is due to the the building standards that your home was built to.
Mm.
How leaky are your windows and doors? How much insulation you have in the walls and in the ceiling?
Mhm.
And we also have a grid system which is extremely wasteful. It generates power at some distant location, Niagara Falls or Pickering, and then ships it to some distant place at great cost. There's energy loss along
I
all
see.
those transmission towers. There's
Mhm.
how much cost has gone into building all those towers and maintaining them, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things which we do and have done because energy was cheap.
Mhm.
Gas and oil was cheap. And we were just using the atmosphere as a dumping ground for the carbon dioxide, and we have never really paid for that, but we are now, and we're getting right into the root cause of climate change. And my demonstration here is saying, look, I can live off grid for 300 days. This is how I've done it, and much of that is my energy generation is only a couple of meters away from where it's being consumed.
I see. Uh-huh. Okay, got it.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And energy storage. Here's another one that I store energy in those Tesla batteries, electrical energy. I store thermal energy into the ground,
Oh,
and I also store electrical energy into the grid. I do have an electric vehicle as well, and I can store energy in that battery.
hmm.
What most people stumble on, like you just did, was using the ground as thermal energy storage. And I do that every day.
Oh,
And, and I extract that energy as well. I use the ground as a thermal battery. Just like Tesla batteries are electric storage, I use the ground for thermal storage.
my word.
Okay.
I haven't heard that. Okay.
Yeah, well,
I hope you're going to explain that.
uh, how much time do we have? I well, let me just say this to answer your question. The Carnot Cycle is is has been around since I believe that this invention was somewhere around the 1890s, and that's the very cycle that is used in your refrigerator and your air conditioners. And that's all I'm doing. I'm using that same cycle, like your refrigerator takes heat from a cold place, where your ice is being made, and dumps it into a higher temperature place, the room that or your kitchen. And so I'm doing the same thing. I'm taking energy from a cold place, which happens to be the ground, and I'm dumping it into the house at about 35 degrees C to heat the house. And so, if you don't understand the Carnot cycle, this becomes a very difficult concept to grasp. But we've been doing it ever since refrigerators came on the scene, and you're doing it, and every household that has a refrigerator is doing it. It happens in your air conditioning in your car, and it happens in household air conditioners. So, um,
Hmm.
other than giving a lecture on the Carnot cycle and how that works, which would probably take better part of an hour,
Yeah, sure.
I
Okay.
don't think we should get too deep into that. Okay, and I talked about transportation. Resilience is very much part of this design as well, because I have to look at failure modes that says what happens when something goes wrong, and I'm also very interested in the concept of survival. What happens when the grid goes down for a few weeks, as happens from time to time with major storms, and we're going to see more of those due to climate change. How can one survive? And I'm showing that, hey, I've got a good shot at surviving for 300 days with the grid outage, and I'll talk a bit more about that. And of course, reliability. Oh, pardon me. Storm forecasts as well, because most grid outages are based on weather events, and although we could run into major problems with wildfires anywhere along those tower lines, that could cause some major disruptions. Um, but so one also has to look at forecasting storms, and Environment Canada is very good at doing that. So I keep a constant eye on the weather and what's happening. Reliability is a major part of the mission as well. I talked about making an island which says I'm independent of that big power grid. I island myself is the term that's used in the industry, but I still remain connected to the grid. And I'll explain a bit more about that. Because why should I be sitting independent when I can do two things? I can sell energy back into the grid and make some money at it, which I do, but I have to be connected to do that. And what happens when my batteries run out? I can go back to the grid and say, well, I've been caught short. And this is what happens every January and February, because the sun is very low, the sunrise to sunset is very short, and even worse, there's snow and ice that builds up on my arrays, and I just can't get any solar energy.
Now, wait a minute. You've said that today is the 300th day that you are off the grid. Now, but you said something about January being a difficult time. Are you expecting that in January you're going to have to go back on the grid because of the weather?
You betcha. That's exactly what I'm saying. And
Oh,
I know I am not going to make it.
oh.
I know that right
Okay.
now.
I thought you were promising that we could all do the same thing year round, but no, okay.
Well, you're dependent. You see, as I'm saying down here, I'm in harmony with nature, and and if nature says there's going to be it's going to be overcast for 30 days, that's really unfortunate, isn't it?
Yeah.
I no longer have that energy source. Anyway, we'll get back to this flexibility. What I do is I collaborate extensively with a number of Canadian industries in terms of trying to give them a showcase for their technology and their equipment, and in turn, that showcase they get into their marketing stream and help their products. So I become an R&D site for them and to help improve their products. And finally, this low COVID-19 infection threat, and that itself is a separate presentation item. But what it does, it uses the ultraviolet C band, which attacks the RNA molecule and breaks off a hydrogen atom or two and renders it null and void. And that's going through my furnace all the time. Every time the fan is running, I'm cleansing the air, and I run that such that, and I configure it in such a way that the fan is running all the time. I'm getting about 5 air changes. The complete volume of the house is changed every 5 minutes. It's cleansed. I recycle the air because I've just cleansed it. I don't have to bring in cold air from the outside. It's already preheated, and I cycle it back, but it's cleansed.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
but that's a presentation all by itself. I'll jump through much of this now, but it is freedom from fossil fuels, which I'm after, and it's always on. And of course, it's a demonstration, and I'll leave it at that. If people want to see all these slides, I don't know what arrangements you make, but we can make it all available. Right now, in terms of energy production, I've got two rooftop solar strings, a total of 59 panels. It's quite a large array. One string has 20 panels and the other's 39. Now, this is I'm connected to the grid with two separate contractual arrangements with Hydro One, and one of those strings is with 20 panels, and that's under the net metering contract. And some of your listeners might be aware of that.
Say that again. I didn't understand the word you used. The,
Net metering. It's a contract. It's that is used, quite frankly, around the world. It's net metering is a means whereby one can have a solar array on your roof, and it's generating power which you're using to run all the appliances and things in your house, but you're generating more than you can use at that moment.
Mhm.
So you take that excess and you put it onto the grid, and therefore, in my case, Hydro One has use of that power. They give me a credit, and they say you put this much energy, this many kilowatt hours into the grid, and that's gone off and has been used by some of your neighbors, and and they sell it, and in turn they give me a credit so that when the sun has set and I need some power, I draw back on my credits.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's equivalent to using the grid as a battery. I'm putting it there for temporary storage because I know the sun's going to set, and I'm going to draw it down on that in the dark
If
hours.
sorry, but if the grid got blown up somehow, you'd still be able to get along with what you have. You're not dependent on the grid at any point.
Well, that's what the 300 days is to prove, to show,
Okay.
and that's why you have batteries, because instead of just taking that excess energy and dumping it onto the grid, I charge my batteries. And so my batteries are then available after sunset to keep the all the appliances and everything in the house operational. So, and the other string of 39 panels is what is known as a MicroFIT, which is a contractual arrangement. I have a second contract with Hydro One, which says I, for 20 years, will provide you with all the solar energy that is generated by those 39 panels, and you will pay me at a certain rate for every kilowatt hour that I send into the grid. So they're two separate contracts, okay? And the MicroFIT one, the one with uh, the large number, 39 panels, is a money maker. I
Hmm.
just sit there, and when the sun is out, I make money,
Mhm.
and and so that is part of the program as well. It says, how do I pay for all this equipment, and and of course, um, a lot of the payback is funny sort of money, um, because I'm not buying gasoline. I'm saving money. I'm not buying natural gas.
Mhm.
I'm not buying electricity. So that's what I mean. It's kind of negative money in that it means my cash flows are reduced,
Mhm. Great.
and as well as the fact that I'm making some money directly. And so let's move on here because there's some interesting stuff I want to show you. Um, as I say, I want to operate our home off grid without, really disrupting the natural flow of what happens in the house. There's laundry days, and there's and you want to keep warm and et cetera, et cetera. And the power loads vary throughout the day. And so it should be almost business as normal, like any other household. And, and of course, the objective was to do it for 300 days. I started this on the 7th of March of this year, and in 300 days, it just so happens is today.
That's great. Have you had any crises along the way where something you really ran into a problem because you didn't have the power you need?
No.
Great. All right.
I have been through one 6 hour and 50-minute grid outage, which I almost didn't even know it was happening. Well, I didn't. Yeah, there was no disruption in the household in any way.
Yeah.
And my system automatically disconnects from the grid during outages like that. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about when I say off grid. You see, many people have a vision of off grid, meaning it's like you're sitting on a mountaintop as a hermit, and you've got a solar panel up and you have no connection to the outside world whatsoever. Well, that isn't what I'm doing. I'm not sitting on a mountaintop. And because I am tied to the grid 100% of the time. Okay, that's, for 24/7, 365. Because I'm selling. Why would I go to a mountaintop if I can't sell? So I am connected to the grid.
So how much do you make from this sales?
I make about $130 a month.
Oh, all right. Good for you.
And that's for 20 years. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and you can add in on top of that the money I'm not spending.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, which is that's about another $8,000 a year.
Okay. Okay.
So it's as I keep telling people, I've got one more year to go, and I've paid off all this equipment.
Hmm?
Because people always ask, yes, but that's very expensive. I can't afford that. Well, you just bought a new car, didn't you? You can afford that. You went into debt. Do you think I didn't go into debt to buy all this equipment? Of course I did. And I have to pay down my line of credit, and that's what I've done. Anyway, with being off grid, the Tesla battery firmware is really excellent, and it allows me to have a lot of visibility and control of what is going on with some of my energy flows. And it also lets me know if the grid is still present. When it fails or there's an outage, it lets me know within 2 seconds of it happening, and which is always good to know. And it also, Tesla batteries, is a good place to store energy. Now, I'll skip over that. That's a definitional thing. Energy rationing. Well, there's two types of rationing. When you think about how you live your life, there are some things which you can do if you have a battery, and I call it time shifting, whereupon you say, well, really, do I have to do that today? at midnight. Isn't it better if I did it at noon because the sun is up?
Hmm.
And that means I can take energy from the sun, do my laundry, and then I have more energy available to take me through the night. Okay, so there's time shifting
Oh,
that
yeah.
you can do, and and that's a form of rationing. And it might be not quite business as usual, but it's an acceptable adjustment.
Sure.
And and of course, the other energy rationing is the means to uh, store energy in either into the grid or into the battery. And as I've said, I have a financial incentive to try and move as much energy as I can into the grid because I get paid more to when I sell than when I have to buy, which says that's a good deal, and so why wouldn't I do everything I can to sell into the grid? Um, and I'll just jump here to talk about operations. I talk about a mini survival mode, and survival is very much part of my thinking, particularly with climate change. And as the weather systems become more difficult, and we see many more tornadoes, grid outages, and we're going to be looking at more and more methods of survival, and so that's constantly on my mind. And every time I'm doing an experiment or developing a procedure, I'm saying, is this going to improve my ability to survive a hit? And of course, I call this is clearly R&D. Um, and what I'm going through in this 300 days is I'm simulating a crisis.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm saying, can I survive through this crisis? And and that really is a major um, operational challenge. And of course, this means I have to look at the household power loads, what they are, and worry about how I'm going to look after the power generated from the solar system. Constantly watching the battery state of charge, and of course, my nemesis is weather, clouds, snow, home heating are all driven by weather. And of course, our lifestyle, yes, we have a sauna and we have an electric vehicle and we kind of like hot water. There are things within everyone's lifestyle that you want to be able to manage, even when you're in, as it were, a semi-crisis. Um, we've got seasonal things like in the winter the sun elevation isn't as high, and the sunrise to sunset is much shorter. Therefore, we cannot get as much energy from the sun as we can, of course, in the spring uh, and summer. Now, or in the like right now, the winter solstice is the 21st, summer of December, and summer solstice is 21st of July, and that's really when make out very well with energy. And of course, I have to maintain records and and on on my daily challenge. I'm saying, how can I make my way through until tomorrow morning, or until tomorrow when the sun rises enough that I'm getting energy again. Um, I'm going to have to talk power flows in kilowatts, and that's what this means. Watts, of course, is the name of the person who did a lot of work in early days, and kilowatts just means 1,000 of those watts. And if we let it run for an hour, we then get energy, which is in kilowatt hours. So, and I'll be talking a little bit about some of these real things that are happening. I want to show you a picture now, and this is from the 23rd of April of this year. And here's a 24-hour picture of the consumption of energy in my house. Here's midnight on the 23rd, we're at 0001, and this is at 23:59. Okay, midnight to midnight, with noon stuck right in the middle. And April, my ground source heat pump was going off, and that's what all this kind of furry stuff is.
Sorry, what was going on?
The heating the house.
Oh,
I was drawing energy from the ground, and this required a compressor being run, and you can see the compressor duty cycle was going on and off, up and down. It's sort of like a sawtooth curve there. And then what happened around 7 o'clock, you see this peak in demand in the house, and that was due to hot water heating coming on. I heat the hot water a couple of times through the day, and you can see other peaks here.
Those are all hot water heated, right there.
There's one here just before doing the dishes time, and there's one just before going to bed time.
Now, in another household like mine, I live in an apartment building, so all my hot water comes from the building. But in a house, normally there'd be a hot water heater going. I guess it would go on and off all day long, right? And
that is one major energy waste. Enormous energy waste. And so we don't do that here.
So you've got it programmed to do it at certain specific times, and you hope that your water stays, you got enough hot water to last till the next heating cycle. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, it isn't, there's no hope involved here. It's a matter of fact. I set the heating cycle such that why do I need hot water here at 7 in the morning? I don't have to have hot water, all night. There's absolutely no reason. And even if you want some, there's going to be some left over from this heating cycle at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
The water doesn't go instantly cold.
I'm just wondering now, in between, when it goes down, how much hot water is there? If you want to take a bath in the 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something, would there be enough hot water there in between the heating cycle?
I guess it depends on how hot you want it. Now, to overcome that issue, because when in pre-pandemic days, when the grandchildren came and with their parents, well, the demands on hot water were increased. I have built into the system then a means of manual control. You can just go and say, press the button, and it'll start heating hot water right away. And so you say, okay, let's try and space this out a little bit. Or I can put it on for 4 hours, you know, and say, just keep heating it. As long as there's demand, just keep heating it. And so there's a number of ways to manually take over where the computer was doing it, and I write the software anyway to say when it should be and for how long. And I can change that at any time if I wanted to. But over a period of years, we've got a good cycle here, and we have a manual means of activating it. And my wife has another switch which most households don't, and she can turn it on and get hot water whenever she wishes. Okay.
Okay.
Well, and so you can see some of these peaks are hot water heating, and this one I know happened to be charging the EV, because my wife had gone out and came back after doing some shopping or something in the village, and and you can see another peak here. This was making soup or something at lunchtime, and then you can see the normal base load that's going on. So and here I've got the coffee pots going on and sump pumps and all sorts of things happening. But the big energy hogs from this, just looking at it, are home heating, domestic hot water, the EV charging, running our sauna, and of course what are known as phantom loads. Those are all your instant on TV, and it's your running of your refrigerator. It's functioning all by itself. You don't know when it's coming on. It's just doing it all automatically. There's there's a whole host of phantom loads in everyone's home. I went around and looked at all mine, and I had about 50 of them.
Wow.
Your computer is clearly one if you leave it on all the time. If you have a router, the router's plugged in all the time. Your internet connection is plugged in all the time, and so it goes. There's a lot of things.
But nevertheless, you've got that as number 5 in the list. So it's not comparable to the amount of energy required for heating the house or making hot water, right? Even with 50 of these phantom loads, it's not.
Well, the phantom load you see is, if you can just follow my cursor, it's roughly this guy,
The low point
at
are
the bottom.
okay. Uh-huh.
And if you take the area under the curve there, I mean, that's a big piece of energy consumption
Yeah.
throughout the day. And
And it sure makes it convenient. I mean, I know that I should leave things unplugged so it doesn't, but I like to be able to have my computer come on immediately, and that I suppose is just part of the problem, isn't it? We want convenience.
well, we're right back down into, you're saying, where is this energy waste going on? Well, there's one of them. You're willing to use energy for convenience, okay? Rather than to wait the minute or two it takes to boot up from a cold boot.
Mhm,
You want it on within 5 seconds.
mhm.
And but is that energy waste? In my books, it is. You know, um,
The place where we could get into a moral discussion, I don't think I want to have that conversation because I'm pretty immoral along those lines.
but well, the thing is, most people are. That's part of our lifestyle,
Yeah.
and you know, I got some more interesting things to show you here. But you know, this is like an instant in time.
Hmm.
And this is saying whatever time it must have been. My solar array was producing, 300 watts or zero point 0.3 of a kilowatt, which was just balanced by the demand in the house.
Hmm.
And so that makes a very nice graphic that you can see. There's no power coming from the Powerwall batteries and nothing coming from the grid.
Hmm.
Now here's another nice thing that the a graphic that says on the 23rd of April, here around, I'd say 7 in the morning, the sun started to rise. It rose and it reached its peak, and it stayed flat there through the day. The sun started to drop off around 3 in the afternoon, and finally, just before 8 o'clock, the was sunset.
Hmm.
And so here's sunrise about 6:30 and sunset about 7:30, and the maximum was 4.9 kilowatts with the flat top. And if you did the sum of the area under this curve, that was about 40.7 kilowatt hours generated in one day, and and the software does that. It integrated that, and so you can see what's happening now. Um, this was on sunrise on the 23rd of April. I took a picture of this saying, look, the battery state of charge, it had depleted down to 50%. I only had 50% of the capacity left. This is getting to your question. You know, how much battery do you need? How much are you using? Well, on the 23rd of April of this year, I had my battery charge was 50% full, and the sun came up, and I charged it up to 100% again, and and which is interesting to see.
Hmm.
Now, here's what the battery charge looked like. You see, I was running through the night, and everything above the x-axis here is is a discharge, and then what happens when the sun came out? All of a sudden, it started to charge again,
Hmm.
and charging is below the x-axis until we get into sunset again, and then power is being drawn.
I'm kind of interested in the fact that this is such a sharp reversal. It's just like instantaneous. My experience is that twilight and dawn last a long time. And
Uh-huh.
you would think that it would be a much more gradual shift from consumption to output.
Very, very, very good observation. I'll show you now. I'm going to put sunrise and sunset on top of what's happening on the batteries. Okay?
Hmm.
And you can see the sunrise starting here,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden there's some break point where the consumption is in the house is being totally satisfied by solar,
Hmm.
and then all that extra energy suddenly becomes available. Bang! What are you going to do with it? Charge the battery. Okay?
Hmm.
And that makes for some pretty sharp rises.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you notice, there's something funny happening
Yeah,
here.
there's there. That's odd. What's the explanation for that?
There it is. The explanation for that is the battery was 100% charged. I
Uh-huh.
couldn't put any more into it,
Uh-huh.
so I started to dump it onto the grid.
I see. Okay.
Okay, and so that ended up being 1.9 kilowatt hours dumped on the grid.
Hmm.
and this was what was happening. So if I put it all together, it's quite a busy picture, but you can see the consumption, you can see the sun coming up and going down, you can see the battery being charged, you can see dumping onto the grid, and it's all lumped together in one graphic. Very busy, but if you understand it, it's not too difficult to understand.
Right. Sure.
And so, but I have to take you through it. You see, here's another one, um, where the grid was used as a battery. This was withdrawing a little bit from the grid, and this was depositing a whole lot back on the grid.
Now, that's a different day. Is that right? So
Yeah,
some
yeah.
days you,
Every,
now
every
you're dumping a lot more back onto the grid today on the 11th than you did the slide you showed before.
yeah, yeah, and every
Does it
day,
vary that much, or nor is that usual for one day to be 2 or 3 times as much as another?
absolutely, it's all over. Every day is really very different, and so there is no such thing as a standard day. I just want to conclude here that said we've been operating our grid, our home off grid, and again with that caveat, I'm not really off grid. I'm I am connected all the time, but I'm not paying for the energy. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and I started on the 7th of March of 2020, and today is day 300,
Mm-hmm.
and we're still not finished. There
So
has been a little bit of sun.
when you get your bill, for when you get your hydro bill every month or wherever, it shows you that maybe you got a credit each time, or what? What do you see with this bill?
Interestingly, it keeps track of what I dump on the grid and what I take out,
Mm-hmm.
and they have an algorithm which is very good. It it gives me control and or at least visibility as to what I've done from Hydro One's perspective. I
Mm-hmm.
know what I've done from my perspective, and and I compare the two from time to time, and I think I've got a little argument with Hydro One. They're skimming me a little bit, but good luck with taking that up with them. and at least, as I say, the Manotick microgrid, my prior record was 96 days in 2019, and that was my first try at seeing how long I could be, as it were, off grid, and I learned a lot from it,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm up to 300 days, and I've learned a lot from it. My
Mm-hmm.
next push is to say, can I really do 365 days?
365. Yeah. All right. That you've got something to look forward to, right? Yeah. Okay. Turn this off so we can look at each other as we get ready to say goodbye. Because no, what's that? That's
I just wanted to show,
oh yeah. That
okay,
doesn't cover your whole house. My goodness. I had the idea that with all of the solar panels, you must have your whole house covered, but no, it's not that big of space, right?
well, this is a condominium. There's 4 living units here.
Oh, I see. So you've covered you've got a quarter of it, and you've covered most of
And this is,
your own roof. Mhm.
and I got 3 neighbors. Okay, and we're so it's a quadplex,
I see. Okay.
and you can see where this field was dug up to put my heat exchangers in the ground, And in
Mhm.
fact, that is the excavator. He was still sitting there when
Oh,
when,
yeah.
when that picture was taken.
You
Anyway,
got lawn over that now. That bare spot
oh
is
yeah,
covered
oh,
with lawn now, right?
oh yeah. I got some loads of topsoil in and
Uh,
fixed it all up, and you wouldn't even notice that anything has happened now. Okay, I'm going to stop the share here.
well, that's real fun. Now tell me, I have you're clearly promoting this idea that maybe people ought to do what you're doing. I live in a condo, a high rise, so I have no possibility of that. But that's an expensive proposition. Tell me how much it cost you, and uh, how long would it take before you've recovered your expenses? Could an ordinary person go out and do what you've done, and would it require a lot more attention than an ordinary person could invest in terms of just monitoring it and trying to manage the whole system?
Okay, well, let's put it this way. I consider myself an ordinary person anyway, and
No, you're not. You're an engineer, and I have trouble doing arithmetic, and I couldn't begin to do what you're doing. And there are a lot of more people like me than there are people like you.
okay, the no, good point. Um, but I've done something quite different from most people anyway, because I've turned my whole home into a lab. Nobody does that. I do it. And so I'm really unique. And I've put in parts of the system which, when I went to commercial people to put it in, they said, "You want to do what?"
Mm.
And that's going to cost you more money. And I said, "Yes, I understand that. But this is what I want to do." So no matter, I'm kind of reluctant to say I spent this much money because it doesn't really reflect what it would cost the normal homeowner. I know
Okay,
the
now
builder.
suppose to the builder, you're in a fourplex place. Suppose when it was built, the builder anticipated what you've done and tried to do the equivalent to all of those places. Would that be a reasonably affordable thing? Would a normal person be able to live in a house like with the uh, facilities that you have?
Absolutely, very good point. It's the difference between new build and a retrofit. You see, I'm in a retrofit mode, and that means I had to pay to get an excavator in to dig holes and put heat exchangers in the ground. When they're putting the foundation in, it's already exposed. It's already there. You can just put some PVC pipe around. It's nice and easy and cheap. But we're not doing that. That's not part of the building code. People
Okay.
are
Now,
people are
I've
still resisting, saying you cannot get energy from the ground. Of course you can. I'm doing it.
wonderful. One of the people on our board of directors for the project to save the world is somebody who runs he's an architect running an operation called Sustainable Architecture, and I've done a talk show with him about how to build more sustainable buildings. Now he wasn't talking about fitting it up with all of the doodads that you've got. I don't know how realistic your operation would be for somebody starting from scratch. But is there anybody? In fact, I've done a couple of shows. I'd like to do several more with builders who are serious about trying to create tract houses, large developments of housing that would include all of the fancy stuff you've got. And is it conceivably affordable?
The answer is absolutely. And there are, in fact, pilot programs going on in Ontario, taking I think it's a couple of hundred homes, and they all have solar on them, all being integrated together and being a community of microgrids. And the idea being, if you have multiple communities, you then have an equivalent of a nuclear reactor, okay? And and so you really don't have to go and build another nuclear reactor. You just have to put solar on more homes, okay? And every building and even yours has got a roof, and the sun shines on it, and there's no question that all that energy right now is going to waste, and all you have to do is go and collect it. Every living unit that I'm aware of is built somewhere. There's a foundation in the ground, and there's energy coming up from the molten core of the earth. Energy is coming up from the ground to you. All you have to do is go and collect it. And there's energy coming down from the sun onto you. All you have to do is go and collect it. But fossil fuels have been really cheap and very convenient. And so our whole society for the last 100 years has been built around the use of fossil fuels. And we now have to change. We have to get off our habit of fossil fuels. The most advanced places right now at doing this, a lot in Europe, very big in terms of incorporating solar and wind. California, very strong, and you see a lot in Nevada, Texas, big wind farms, and they're interesting. Texas is going off fossil fuels, and at least for power generation, and you see a lot of advances as well in this taking place in New York.
Mm-hmm. Now, how much difference does the climate make? I mean, you obviously couldn't build a thing like this in the Arctic because you're not going to have that much sunshine. How much difference does it make? You live pretty far north. I mean, Ottawa's not quite the jungle. But I presume it'd be a lot cheaper to run a thing like this if you're doing it toward the equator.
Oh, absolutely. You see, and this is part of the demonstration that I'm saying, look, in Ottawa, I can do it, and what percentage of Canada's population lives south of me? You know.
Okay, could you do it in Helsinki or St. Petersburg?
Absolutely.
Oh, as well as you're doing? Because my experience of having been there at midnight when it was the solstice was there's a lot more sun here that time of year.
Well, the answer is if you can do it 100%, or you can only do it 50%. Is it worthwhile doing? Is it worthwhile reducing the carbon loading of the atmosphere by 50%? Must it be 100% in one step, or can we ease into this a little bit at a time?
Yeah, but I mean, it's a question of who lives where, right? I mean, it'd be a better investment if you live south than the same. You cost you less, and you get more return on your investment if you lived in a very sunny area than in Helsinki.
Well, I guess we'd have to look at the latitude of Helsinki. I know that, for example, the latitude of London, England, is further north than we are, and that's finding some very good solar activity and systems that are going in there. Helsinki, I'm not sure what the latitude is, but it'd be worthwhile looking at to see if it's
Well, it and
north or south than from us.
Petersburg, Stockholm, places like that are up pretty far north. Makes a difference, you know.
Well, of course, it makes a difference. I'm not denying that, and sure, the further north you go, the less sunlight you're going to have in the winter. But
Mm.
it's very good in the fall, spring, and summer.
Well, can you still get a good amount of heat from the ground if you're going far north? What
Uh,
happens about that? Because I don't really understand that thing about the heat from the core of the earth being something you could pull out and use. Uh, how? I mean, the core of the earth is going to radiate in all directions, isn't it? So presumably, it's radiating north as much as it is radiating sideways.
well, it's a globe, and you've heard of the hot springs in Iceland, where people are out swimming around in the hot springs in the middle of the winter, and they heat much of their buildings with geothermal heat, which are natural.
That's not true everywhere. If you go to, in Iptituк, where you want to go in Canada, you may not have the same geothermal facilities that you would have in Iceland.
Well, I let's explore that a little bit. Number one, the Earth's crust is is not uniform and it's different no matter where you are in the world. Correct.
Mhm.
But the core, the nuclear reacting core that is happening just underneath the crust is applicable everywhere. Mind you, if you say, well, I'm going to go to the top of Mount Everest, well, I mean, that's kind of silly because, to get down to where it's warm, you got to drill down through the mountain, okay?
Right.
And the same thing with going underwater. You've heard of the hot springs, and that exist down at the very depth of the oceans, and there's boiling water there all the time, and volcanoes exist around the world, and well, particularly around the Ring of Fire, as they call it, around the Pacific. And but that just means there's geological variations of the Earth's crust and its thickness. But it's all there, no matter where you go in the globe. and and
I would think since it is so clearly obvious that the energy in the center of the earth is available, uh, why isn't it used more? I mean, it must be that it's more expensive to dig a hole than it is to capture it with solar panels or wind power.
no, I think it's because people are not used to the idea of geothermal. Now there's I know in Saskatchewan there's a company that is using old oil wells, and because they already are going down 3 kilometers, and when you're down 3 kilometers, you can get temperatures that are about 150 degrees C,
Hmm.
and and so they dump water down, and they get superheated steam coming back up, and they do some things, and ultimately run a compressor to generate electricity. Um, and I mean, these are things that are happening right now.
And you're saying that they're not prohibitively expensive. I would think that the market is so important in our lives that if a technology was going to be feasible and economically uh, uh, realistic, that somebody would have jumped onto that already, and we'd have big companies ready to poke holes in the ground in everybody's backyard.
Well, there's companies that are ready to do that.
Okay, could you, if you didn't have the solar, and you haven't even talked about tapping into the wind. Of course, the wind is just for the people who are running the grid, I guess. But if you didn't have the solar, and you just wanted to do it all with ground electricity, could you do it? Could you get your energy all entirely from the ground?
I could, but I'd have to go a little bit deeper. I only went down 2 meters. I'm after low grade heat. I'm not after high grade heat. And so the temperature where of the ground where I am right now, year round, it sits around 10 to 12 degrees C. It's isothermal. It doesn't change. It's been that way since the last ice age. And so what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm tapping into that and I'm drawing energy out of that 10 degrees C, pumping it up to 35 degrees C and heating my house.
Look, I don't want to push you too hard, but I still say, strikes me as bizarre that if it's really as easy as you say, why the hell doesn't everybody do that? Why are we even fooling around with solar? We should be doing, I mean, it sounds to me as if the smart thing would be just go out and poke a stick in the ground and go pretty far deep and get your energy. And why aren't we doing mostly that? It must be an economic problem.
Oh, certainly the economy is part of it.
No, but I mean, the cost of doing it must be that it won't compare with the cheapness of solar or wind or some of these other things.
No, it doesn't compare to the use of fossil fuels. And therefore, geothermal energy has been around since the Big Bang. But why use it when you got fossil fuels, which are a whole bunch cheaper and a big lobby has
Sure.
been built around it. And the reason it hasn't been used is because fossil fuels have been.
But we are shifting like crazy over to solar and wind. We're not shifting like crazy over to ground. What? I don't even have language for what you're doing. We're not doing that. Now there must be a good economic or some other practical reason why that isn't happening. If they're really competitive, if you could do it just as cheaply with this ground sources.
And that's what's happening. That's what the people in Saskatchewan are doing. They're demonstrating exactly what you're saying. They're going down quite deep using an old. Well, I'm not so sure it was an old well or not, but they're going down about 3 kilometers, and they've got good geological rock that's in the area, and they can pump water down and get superheated steam back up. And they're demonstrating exactly what you're saying. They're going to show that
that's just delightful to know.
And it's economically feasible. Yes.
That's delightful to know because there are a hell of a lot of old abandoned oil wells and other kinds of wells in this world. Now, are many of them deep enough to make that an option?
Well, they can be drilled deeper, can't they?
I don't know. I mean,
yes.
That's the question. Are they? How expensive is it? Must be not that expensive to dig because they keep drilling holes for oil. If they wouldn't, if it, I don't know. They can. If it's possible to drill a hole that deep to get oil, then maybe it's equally possible to drill a hole that deep to get electricity.
Well, you're getting. You can go that deep. Absolutely, the technology exists, and the financial feasibility of doing so is going to be demonstrated with this pilot program in Saskatchewan. I mean, I don't know all those numbers. Sorry, you can ask me all day. I can't respond.
But I can hardly wait to hear the outcome of that. It's like something really.
There's a very large building in Toronto right downtown Toronto that has in fact gone and is using geothermal because they had to go down so deep with, I don't know, 4 or 5 levels of garage or whatever it is. And but beneath that, they put in a whole bunch of drilled holes and put geothermal heat exchangers in them. So, but that was a new build, and that was in a very high population density area. But they did it at construction time, and it's a lot cheaper, of course. And finally, people are coming around to say, hey, this is cheaper to do it than to burn oil and electricity. Okay,
Mm.
and so yeah, it's happening, and it's happening in Ontario. It's happening around the world. Um, the mere fact that you haven't heard about it is, well, you're not reading the same material I am. you know.
Well, I better get smarten up and start reading better sources because this is fascinating. Okay, this has been wonderful. We've run over time, but that's the way it should be. And it's just a thrilling thing to see what you've done. So thank you so much for